When you hear about Mexican drug cartels, Minnesota likely isn't top of mind. But there have been not one, but two cases allegedly involving those cartels in our state in just the past 5 days. The most recent happened in St. Paul on Tuesday, where, according to court papers, a source told police he was ordered to torture and kill someone who owed the cartel some money. The other happened a few days ago in St. Cloud, where a woman was charged under the Kingpin statute for her role in a Mexican drug smuggling operation. Now, these cases speak to the bigger problem of fentanyl and other drugs finding their way into our country, and specifically in our state. Lou, you took a look. What'd you find?
Well, Jenna, authorities say that the majority of the fentanyl and other illicit drugs originate from the Mexican drug cartels, but the cartels don't get directly involved in Minnesota like what's alleged in this St. Paul case until drugs or money goes missing.
In an old warehouse on Payne Avenue in St. Paul, right across the street from a St. Paul police substation, officers rescued a man who'd been handcuffed to a basement pillar, beaten, and tortured. They arrested these three people who, according to the criminal complaint, pointed the finger at a Mexican drug cartel.
When the cartel gets involved is when someone has stolen their drugs or their money.
Retired federal prosecutor Jeff Paulson handled an eerily similar case in St. Paul 10 years ago.
And they kidnapped who they thought had stolen the drugs, took them to a secluded location, a stash house, tied them up, beat them, tortured them, cut one guy's finger almost off with a pair of garden shears, all to avenge this loss and send a message to anybody else that might cross the cartel. Sadly, they had the wrong people.
In the current case, St. Paul police were tracking Richard Sanchez Mujica for suspected drug trafficking when, according to the criminal complaint, they got a tip from an informant that the cartel had ordered Mujica and the informant to murder the man being held prisoner at the Payne Avenue warehouse. The victim supposedly owed the cartel money. Police stopped Mujica as he was driving to the warehouse, allegedly with a loaded gun. There they found the victim, allegedly held by these two, Erling Holdall and Kendra Johnson, who are now also charged with kidnapping, drugs, and weapon counts. Court papers say Holdall told police he too owed money to his Mexican contacts and thought the victim was brought to his warehouse to send him a message.
Given this incident in St. Paul, it's certainly not abandoned Minnesota as a market.
In Paulson's past case, he convicted the enforcers sent by the cartel to commit a kidnapping, but it was hard to take it further than that.
We tried to, of course, get them to say who sent them, and there was no way because they didn't want to have happened to them what they had just done to these people. It's hard to get anybody to cooperate against the upper echelons of the cartel because of their ruthlessness. It's not impossible, but it takes a lot of extra effort to get to the big people in Mexico.
Michaela Scott from St. Cloud was recently sentenced to 26 years in prison for her role helping the cartel import drugs into the Midwest. Between that and the disturbing St. Paul case this week, a reminder that the cartel's influence reaches into Minnesota.
Unfortunately, our demand for drugs seems to be insatiable.
Now, St. Paul police didn't want to comment on the case today, indicating that they are working with the feds. So there could be more to come on this case, Jana.
Lou, any idea of how folks here in Minnesota even get connected with these cartels in Mexico?
That is a very good question, and that case out of St. Cloud illustrated it a little bit. But it's one of those things where there's multiple degrees of separation often, and the woman didn't exactly know who she's really working for. She just knows the people she's in contact with, but she was close enough to the top that they were able to charge her with, some really big crimes that she was convicted of.
A lot of untangling in that web. Lou, thank you so much. Super interesting.